Good evening, everybody. How are you doing? Happy New Year. Welcome, bienvenue, guten Tag, all the variety of words and languages that basically mean hello and welcome. Or good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending upon your location, what time you happen to be watching this, and whether you're watching this on YouTube live, which hopefully you are. Hi, guys. And yeah, welcome to MMOBuff.TV's Monday podcast, where we discuss a variety of issues relating to MMOs and online gaming. My normal co host, Mizpa, is not with me because he is still in the process of getting the MMO Buff Studios taken care of. So we'll forgive him. And that's okay, though, because I have a guest this particular day. Yes, it was pre recorded, but I'm still going to count it as a live guest because he so deserves that. But anyway, it does look like I'm alone. But as you guys know, I pseudo control time and space. So, what we're going to get a little bit of today is something like this.
I think that tanking, especially when you're good at it, is the easiest thing to do in the raid.
Now, I'm sure seeing that little snippet from Enkay has gotten quite a few to quirk their eyebrows because you may or may not believe what he has just said. However, as our target audience knows, you guys never take anything at face value. You look deeper, you dig deeper, you want to understand the truths that are out there. So obviously, there is a heck of a lot more behind that comment than just simply that. Mr. Fusion's been very busy this afternoon. The flux capacitor is warmed up. And I do have backup power in case I don't reach 88 miles per hour and the time that it takes to actually bend and fold space and time. But before I attempt to do mad science that only a Chua can really fully respect, a tiny bit of news. Now, I want to keep this as quick as possible because, like I had said throughout the week, this show is going to be a little bit longer than normal because I did not want to edit out anything that NK and I discussed. So obviously what ends up happening is that this produces a little bit longer show. It is well worth a watch. I can't thank him enough for taking the time to speak with me. So before we go on, four very quick pieces of news. Now, normally we dig into these. Normally we go into a discussion about them. But again, like I said, I'm already taking up way too much time when we could be focused on the Holy Trinity tanking. And yeah, we'll get there. So number one, we have our two betas that everyone is pretty much familiar with. The Elder Scrolls Online beta pretty much started last week, but due to the very heavily encompassed NDA, that's all I can say about it right now. I don't know why I just winked, but there you go. The Wildstar beta is still going on, and I could go into so much detail about so many things that have been said and things that have been discussed, but we have our Cosmotronic show on Friday. Then the two things that kind of twerked my brain this particular week. Kickstarters. It seems to be the season of Kickstarters. Repopulation, the game that sort of started capturing gamers' imaginations just these past couple of months, has gone to Kickstarter. And again, they've reached their target. And this is a sci-fi game that people seem to be very interested in. It's an MMO, sci-fi. It is Kickstarted. Go check out their Kickstarter campaign page if you are interested in, and I know quite a few are because many of you have actually contacted me to find out more about it. And then, of course, a little bit of a not-so-secret MMO that's also coming to Kickstarter apparently today. Not quite up yet. Wasn't when I was checking before the show, but I live in the United Kingdom, so timing works differently, and while I can bend space and time, I can't exactly bend the packets on the internet no matter how much I try, how many magnets I use, or prisms, depending on if we're on fiber or not. But instead, we have this not-so-secret MMO from Brad McQuaid called Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. Now, this is interesting to me because any information that is out there about this particular MMO is that it is supposed to be a targeted MMO. Instead of trying to be all the things to all the people, they're going to specifically target a certain genre or class of player and build the best game that they can for them. Because they firmly believe that the games that have niches can be successful. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I can't wait till this particular Kickstarter page goes up because I'm going to be all over all the information that they revealed to us because really nothing has come out so far. Now, that's pretty much the quick news. Like I said, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm now going to activate Pseudo's super secret time traveling secret ability of doom. And basically, this is future Pseudo. Past Pseudo? Are you there? Hello, Pseudo from the future. This is Pseudo from the past. I am joined with a very special guest. It is probably someone you may recognize, especially if you follow Death and Taxes over the years. I will let him introduce himself, but as you can see, he's sort of sitting right next to me. Kind of not. Go ahead, introduce yourself, mystery guest, and tell us a little bit about you and why it is you think you're qualified to talk on tanking.
Oh, well, I'm qualified. I didn't know that was coming. It's like a job interview. Hello, everybody on the internet. My name is Enkay, formerly Taunts. You might know me as Steve, officer in Death and Taxes for the better part of the last 9 years.
It's a long
Well, I'm
time.
qualified to talk about tanking. It's it's about a third. Actually, it's exactly a third of my life. Actually, a little bit less now. So that's kind of scary to think about.
Have you tanked the entire
Um,
time?
No, I tanked the majority of the time. When I wasn't tanking, I was trying my hand at priest and shaman, which I was not the best at. Well, I was okay. Not as good as I was at tanking, that's for sure.
There are some people from the past who will point out that there was a time when shamans, if they had a shield and they put a talent point somewhere in their tree, could have off-tanked. Did you try that?
No, I never tried that. I was the shaman
Oh.
variety of when you wanted like 7 bloodlusts and about 8 chain heals. So the Sunwell variety,
Ah,
if you will. Yeah.
Brutalis, the old school racing and everything that goes with
Oh
that.
yeah, oh yeah. But I guess as to why I'm qualified, aside from doing it for the better part of the last 9 years, I have talked about the topic, posted about the topic, been contacted not only when I played World of Warcraft, but currently in Star Wars: The Old Republic, and even beta of a upcoming game, which we won't go too much into right now, on how to tank and what you want as a tank. Resume has, I guess this is where you get to toot your own horn a little bit, about
Name
15,
drop,
yeah, well,
brag.
15,
Go on.
15 world firsts and 20 or so U.S. firsts over the last few years. 90% of which I was tanking on, and the other 10% firing off those chain heals as I was making
The
mention
cheese
to earlier.
cannon is what we
Oh,
used to
yeah.
call it. The good old cheese cannon.
There's actually a picture still on our website somewhere, if you dig deep, of me accidentally chain healing myself, which is, I think, the stupidest thing that a shaman can do. But it seemed like a good idea at the time.
As a healer, I have made those mistakes of, you're getting to that end moment and you were supposed to get the heal off onto the tank. The tank goes down and everyone goes, "What happened?" You're like, "Nothing.
I,
Nothing."
it wasn't, I wish it was that. It was more, I got so used to pressing that 3 key, which was my chain heal at the time. It's basically the only thing I was using, that I noticed I had to go heal myself. And it's probably 5 hours into raiding. I remember this was Hydral progression.
Ooh.
So targeted, pressed F1 or whatever it was, and just press 3. And somebody goes, "Wait a minute, Steve, did you just chain heal yourself?"
Oh,
Yes, I
well,
did.
luckily we discussed healing in our last discussion about the Holy
Yeah,
Trinity.
you don't want to talk to me about
We're not going to go healing this time, so we'll give you a break there. Okay, well, let's take a moment. Like I said, we're here to talk about tanking. We're talking about the individual pieces of the Holy Trinity because it's become such a familiar staple within the MMO genre. And there are games that don't want it, and then there are games that stress it, and then there are those that try to hybrid it. But for now, tanking. Now, I want to know from your personal perspective what you think it takes to be a good tank. Now, keep in mind, you have the old stereotypes of tanks are ego-driven, everyone's supposed to follow their orders, so they are complete control freaks. And then, of course, my favorite one, tanks do nothing but stand there with their sword, their board, and just hold the aggro, because that's all they need to do. Now, these are stereotypes. What do you think? Do you agree with them?
I guess can I address them each one by one?
Oh, by all means, tackle
All
each
right.
one. Myth
Well,
dispelling with NK.
my first MMO, I guess I should start with that I played hardcore, like in '99 till WoW came out, was EverQuest. And for those of you who are too young or didn't play EverQuest, that started off as it was immersive, it was a lot of fun, but it was pretty simple in the sense that the only way that the fights got harder was by making stuff hit harder, or having there be more than one thing that hit harder. So back then, standing there and just holding aggro probably was the truth. But, come December 2004, when a game called World of Warcraft came out, that probably all went down the drain. And even more so now with the complexity of raids, and everything that goes into not just tanking, but 25, 40-man, 16-man raids, whatever game you're playing. There's a whole lot more responsibility than standing there and holding aggro. In fact, if you just stood there, you'd probably die at this point. So I'm going to go with no, that's not true anymore.
Okay.
But I actually think it kind of used to be, like 15 years ago.
So Game
what was the other
Evolutions
one?
had an impact
Yes.
then on
Oh,
what
absolutely.
the actual role of a tank is.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think Game Evolutions had an impact of what DPS is too. I can think of several
Yeah.
fights off the top of my head. In fact, where we needed like a DPS to tank as well. So, so it's definitely changed. But as far as ego driven, for me, that wasn't ever the case. I would like to think for a majority of people that isn't the case. But there is definitely a sense of pride amongst people, and I guarantee you there was with me as well when I first started off, of getting all the heals, being that person that the boss was facing. Like, I can think of times back in the day that I might have just moved a little bit for fun, just to see a giant boss move with me, and it's just like, sweet, that was cool. Was that ego, or is that me just having fun? I mean, that's for you to decide. And as far as... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the myth comes from the fact that anyone who's done rating with voice, more so than, back in the old school days of the text-based, oh my gosh, move, oh, typing that got us killed.
Yeah.
But then again, the fights weren't as complex as they are now. But back in the day, or I should say when the voice started, it was always nice to hear that, oh, healers on Enkay. Or
Yeah,
everyone follow Enkay, or Enkay is pulling, or Enkay, watch out, or I'm sure hearing your name repeated, granted, like you said, you've had a variety of names over the years, but, hearing your name, especially if you're main tanking in a large guild, is, I think that's where the stereotype of your ego based. You want your name in lights, so to speak.
I'm going to say the tanks have egos, but no more than a DPS has an ego who wants to top damage meters, or a healer who wants to top the meters in healing efficiency. I think that you need to have a bit of an ego in order to be successful, especially at the level that we've played and that we plan on playing in the future.
Would you call it ego or confidence, though?
You know what? I think it's both. I mean,
Okay.
what doesn't confidence just feed into having an ego? If I'm a confident person, then I probably have an ego.
Not always. There are some, psychological studies that point the bigger your ego, the lower your confidence.
Okay, well, excuse me, Freud. I guess I have much more confidence than I do ego.
Okay, well,
But
fair enough.
I mean, I can see where it comes from. NK's pulling is just, come on, that's just me trying to be helpful. But I can also think of times where, my younger self will be like, why the hell wasn't I getting healed? What's wrong with you people? So that might have been, but I mean, that was, yeah.
Well, back in the day with EverQuest, and then obviously with the transitions of the games into the more complexity things, I at least remember for myself, my first introduction to really understanding a tank was the tank marking targets. Did you do that? And did you enjoy that? Do you think that's part of why people think that tanks are control freaks, because they control the flow of the pool?
It is true that the tanks have a lot of control by virtue of the fact that, that if you're clearing trash or if you're waiting to pull a boss, you're probably not doing it without a tank there. So, if you have to wait for them to mark something, I mean, that's obviously the case. For me, it was never about that. To be completely honest with you, the reason I went tank the first time was because I wanted groups faster, right? That was why I went tank. Because when I was leveling up, I was like, I want to get a group. I don't want to have to wait. And there was just something cool to the 15-year-old me and the 28-year-old me now that likes getting hit for big numbers and not dying. I don't know, it's just fun.
See, that's the thing.
But
I'm kind of the reverse. I like to see the big numbers go off and someone's health bar move because I'm of the
yeah,
healer spectrum.
exactly.
So,
But go ahead.
no, no, go on. By all means, go on.
I was going to say, to answer your question about being a control freak, um, I can speak for myself, and I can say that yes, I used to be. I no longer am. I've definitely grown out of it. So I would say that myth, probably is rooted in fact. It might still be the case for people, not for me. It kind of pains me to say this, but I bet that a lot of tanks are control freaks.
I don't necessarily think being a control freak is a bad thing because,
No,
there is a certain need to have somebody in control when you're
no,
dealing with a
absolutely.
group. But, it almost sounds based on what you're saying that, the evolution of the tank from standing there going, I will hit you with my sword and my board, to the, oh my gosh, if I don't move him, the entire raid dies. And if we don't get on this conveyor belt, holy cow, we're all going to die. If you have that transition going, it also seems like the personality traits of a tank has evolved as well,
I was
at
just going
least
to
for
actually say that.
you.
For me, and I think probably for most people, just because of the way that MMOs have evolved over the last. I mean, heck, they've evolved a lot since 2008. I mean, we're
Gosh, yes,
talking
they
about
have.
since like 95 or 96, whenever Ultima came out.
Ooh.
Was it Ultima? I think Ultima was the
Ultima
first one.
Online.
Yeah, that
God,
was
that's
admittedly before my time.
yeah, mine as well. I was still playing with muds, so I take it back a little. Text based. Let's go. Okay, so in your opinion, what is the difference between that tank that stands there and does the minimum and just gets the job done, aka a
Hmm.
typical good tank, versus an exceptional one? Is it
That's
part of
a
the
good
personality
question.
traits? Is it part of their knowledge? Is it more based on their awareness of their class? Or is it just the luck of the draw? Did the stars shine on the day they became a tank for the first time?
A shooting star when they're at character select. No. I think it's a
Interworld.
few things. I think it's a few things, and you kind of touched on a few of them. So everybody's capable of, I mean, of being good at a video game. I
Mm,
can read what rotation I want to follow as a DPS, right? I
mhm,
know what spec I want to be, or what certain benchmarks I want to hit for like my hit rating or my crit rating or bonus damage, whatever that might be. But just being able to follow a rotation or just knowing what sort of stats you want isn't enough. You can be
mm,
good, but you're not going to be excellent because so much of what goes into it is, awareness, is being able to react quicker. It's being able to see something once. I can't tell you how many times during progression, as a tank, that you notice because it's happening to you, and maybe not the raid, like a certain animation. You know what's coming after that animation. Maybe it's a certain attack or something along those lines. It's the ability to pick up those nuances that separates, honestly, all good players from excellent players, but especially good tanks from excellent tanks. Um, like I said, I could jump in there and do a rotation and be like, that's good enough. But if I want to be in a top 10, like a world top 10 guild, I need to go above and beyond. Not to
mm.
mention, if you're on the bleeding edge like that, you're not gonna usually have those forum posts to sort of read, right? If you're getting,
If you're the one
if you're on the
writing the posts for other
exactly,
people,
exactly. So
right?
I would say, that's what separates not just exceptional tanks from good ones, but also just players in general.
Well, that's something that I can completely agree with. I mean, it's something we discussed in the healing show as well. You can be good by just, pressing the button, your number three
Yeah.
button. What will make you exceptional is
Okay.
if
I
you
was good, not exceptional at that.
is if you avoid F1 and then press 3. But yeah, it's more or less a matter of going that extra mile. Really, it
Oh,
is.
yeah, absolutely. It's it was definitely something I've noticed within myself. I was forced to go that extra mile, especially in World of Warcraft, because we started off pretty hardcore. I mean, we really came into our own probably at the end of Black Green Lair, which was that second raid, and then we became probably world
Mm.
famous at the start of Naxxramas.
Yes.
So I was forced to get better as everybody else got better. I was especially our DPS and DNT across all the video games that we played, across all the videos I played, I should say, has always been exceptional. And when you're talking about, I don't know if I'm dating myself here, if anybody remembers like Vanilla WoW, it'd be like, okay, wait for 3 Sunders on the boss and then go in. There was none of that. It was like
This
I
is a
auto
3-phase
attack
fight.
and then
Here are 3
yeah.
Sunders. You can attack now. Although I
There
did have a
was-
DPS
yeah.
friend who actually had to dance for half of the fights because the moment he started doing a Shadow Bolt, he
Well, cool.
pretty much,
Yeah.
even with
So
3
that's-
Sunders and half a phase under a tank's control, Warlocks were just a little
Need
bit
that
OP.
blessing of salvation.
There were no
but yeah.
paladins in that raid.
Wouldn't you guys have like a totem or something that reduced threat? I feel like you had something, or maybe you didn't. Maybe that was a totem for fear, and we had Fear Ward on Alliance back in the day.
Well, that's the thing.
that's
I
what it
played
was.
Alliance. It's just that
Oh, you
our
played Alliance?
composition was awkward for that particular fight. But it was just,
Okay.
DPS, 3 Sunders are up. You specific Warlock, dance for like 30 seconds,
Nothing-
please.
Nothing was more awkward than our Blackwing Lair Nefarian comp.
Oh, no.
I don't know if people remember this fight, but you remember how there'd be the 2 tunnels,
Mhm.
and it'd just be the Brood Lords coming out nonstop?
Yep.
Well, we had, being on the cutting edge there, along with just quick shout out to an old competitive guild that we used to benchmark ourselves with. And honestly, we might not be as good as we got, or as competitive as we are now if we didn't have them pushing us on the same server, was Drama. So, we're racing them, and we're having trouble dealing with these Brood Lords. And I remember back then, like, I think you had to wait like an hour between pools or something stupid because Nefarian wouldn't respawn. I can't remember 100%. This is like 8 years ago now. But we actually had a Paladin give Blessing of Wisdom to everybody. That's the one that generated mana.
The mana. On attack.
And that actually generated threat, which a lot of people don't know. So when you do it on 25 people with the mana bar, everybody casts like 80%, then you start the fight, all of those Brood Lords were going to that Paladin. So you had like 14 healers just spam healing that Paladin, and we just AoE everything down in the middle. I would be willing to bet a lot of money that nobody else did that phase that way, that early on anyway, during progression. And it's what we did for the kill, so I think we got like world 2nd or 3rd on that.
Well, going back a little, you said that anyone can be a good player.
Yeah.
Anyone could be an exceptional player, I guess, if they're willing to put the work in. So, in your opinion, it really just takes work, dedication, and effort to become exceptional. And I should say application of that effort, because just doing the work doesn't mean anything. I can read the Encyclopedia Britannica. Doesn't mean I know anything.
True. I mean, some of it's just going to be innate skill. I mean, Kobe Bryant, I'm sure, practices as much as Michael Jordan did, but he's
Fair
not
enough.
as good as Michael Jordan, right? To me, he will always be the number 2 shooting guard of all time until somebody else comes and takes the throne from him or Michael. So obviously, like anything in life, like any video game, if you're playing a first-person shooter on your computer, on your console, whatever it might be, there's just a natural ability that comes with it. But that's not enough, especially at the level that we aspire to be at and that we've been at before. You need to have that self-motivation and that drive to put in the extra effort.
The will, the passion, the blood, the sweat, the tears, which brings me on, oddly enough, to off-tanking.
Oh, yeah.
Now, here's the thing.
Oh, my bad.
I am somebody who spent a little bit of time in the DPS world and then discovered healing, and my life changed forever. I am a healer through and through. I have attempted tanking, and I have come in as an off-tank. And I hear the term bantered around. We have our off-tanks, we have our main tanks. Is there really a difference between them, skill set-wise? I mean, the thing is, when someone hears off-tank, I don't think that is our tank. It's almost as if it's off-putting terminology-wise. So
I could definitely agree that it can be construed that way. Absolutely.
I think we should rename it.
Yeah, we should just rename it to Tank 1A and 1B and 1C.
Oh, but see,
It's
you
all
go
way
with
down
the
line.
A and the B, you're still looking at some kind of comparison. You should have
All right,
something
then how about
like
we just
teddy
call
bear
them by
and
their
like
name?
Now, see, I like
Let's just use
that.
names. Let's just use names. We don't need titles. Just human. Just human tanks this and human tanks that.
I
No,
actually
but
like that a lot. Unless you're playing a Chua, in which case I don't want to talk to you. But that's a
especially
whole
the
different.
especially the nice version of those guys. They're pretty annoying. So I agree that it can be off-putting. I think early on, and I keep going back to stuff like EverQuest and World of Warcraft, since those are probably the two most successful MMOs
They're the
of
big
our time.
monikers. Most people
They're
are
the big
aware
one.
of
I
them.
mean,
Yeah.
to me, EverQuest set the benchmark. I mean, you're talking about guys like Tiggle and Fur from Legacy of Steel, Fires of Heaven, the top EverQuest guilds,
Yeah.
that were flown in by Blizzard in like 2003, 2004, and got jobs at Blizzard because of their experience at with EverQuest, and helped design that game. I mean, there's items in that game. There's NPCs in that game named after Tiggle, Fur, and their guild members, right?
Yeah.
So those are definitely the two big ones. So I keep going back to those for my examples. So I apologize for those of you that might be playing Rift or something, but I'm sure a lot of it's still applicable.
Well, I say don't apologize because while a lot of people sit there and say, "Oh my gosh, this is the next WoW clone. This is the next clone of WoW." WoW was
That's
an
not a bad thing.
EverQuest clone.
WoW was an EverQuest clone, exactly.
And a lot of people don't seem to want to remember that. And it might be either the subscription size or what have you, or, the fact that you had Jean-Claude Van Damme and Ozzy Osbourne doing advertisements.
And Mr. T.
And Mr. T, you can't forget Mr. T.
One last analogy, and I'm going to answer your question if you don't mind.
I like
you just
analogies.
Remind me of something.
Oh, go on.
At my work, whenever we have team meetings, I'm known as the guy with analogies, and they're oftentimes not good. But I keep reading about people. You're talking about WoW being an EverQuest clone, and people are talking about other MMOs being a WoW clone. Keep reading about kids coming up nowadays wearing number 23 in basketball because it was LeBron James's number, and not Michael Jordan's number, but because it was LeBron James's number. But LeBron James wore that number because of Michael Jordan. So it's kind of the same.
The generational gapping
is
starting to occur.
There's nothing wrong with being an EverQuest or a WoW clone. Those games were highly successful. They do a lot of things right. Imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. So
I could not agree with you more, and I go on the record on the show stating exactly that. I completely agree with that. But yes, when it comes to tanking and off-tanking.
Right. Okay, it could be off-putting. I've definitely off-tanked before. Sometimes it's more monotonous, picking up ads. A lot of times it could still be more fun. Because there's some fights where you're literally just we said that that's not the case anymore, but there are some fights where the main tank is just standing there holding aggro, and the 2 or 3 off tanks are the ones doing all the hard work. The ones picking up that ad that comes in that's immediately being bombarded, and you have the whole threat, right? I think we've moved a little bit though from the whole tank off tank thing. There's so many encounters in WoW, in Star Wars, in EverQuest even today. People still play that game, EverQuest 2. Require multiple tanks. There's tank swap mechanics, right?
Right.
So there's like, okay, well, this tank's debuffed, now the other tank is a taunt, or something along those lines. This tank is sent into like a different instance or whatever. Like they have to go down the platform, so the other tank has to pick it up. So I think there's less sort of main tank versus off tank now, and it's just multiple tanks. Speaking to my Star Wars guild, we have our 2 tanks. We're highly successful. I consider myself a main tank. He considers himself the main tank. All those fights require tank swaps almost. The ones that don't, whoever wants to tank it, tanks it. I really don't care. And sometimes, though, it's dependent on the class. If he's better at off-tanking something because of certain abilities, then he'll do it. At the end of the day, I think that people who are like, I'm the main tank, aren't a part of a very good guild. Because I will happily step down if somebody's better than me, which isn't very often, or I should say better at me. There's that whole ego thing, right?
I was just about to say, welcome ego.
No, but what I meant to say was better at me at tanking a certain ability. Maybe they have an ability so they can absorb a
So
boss
sort of
attack
like
better
the
than
difference
I
between
can.
your AoE tank versus your, we'll not necessarily say AoE, but like range tank, or your melee tank, or, your squishy tank that can take magic damage, or the one wearing fire resist. Good old Molten Core. Let's go back there.
Good old Molten Core. Good old Illidan Phase 3, I think it was. If you remember that from Black Temple, the 2 giant fire elementals came out. Yeah, we had that fight. We had 4 tanks on that fight, so. So I look at it now less as whole main tank versus off tank, but back then it definitely was.
I'm
Um,
kind of hoping, like we were talking about with the way we've had the gaming genre of MMOs evolving, I'm kind of hoping that that's occurring within the actual roles within the Holy Trinity as well. And it
mhm,
sounds,
mhm.
from everything that I've experienced with healing versus everything you're saying with tanking, it sounds like it's more evolving with, like, allowing tanks to have evolution. Healers are still kind of just, we're healers, you know? There's obviously the Chandler's been come out from EverQuest 2, which has a whole new kind of mechanic using dissonance and everything. I don't know if you've had a chance to play it yet.
I no, I played EverQuest 2 when it first came out casually,
Right.
which is tough for me to say with a straight face. For like 6 months, I leveled the Defiler. I think I didn't raid or anything. I was just playing it with a buddy to test it out. Um, so I don't know too much about it, and I've been reading a little bit about EverQuest Next. So if that next big MMO, if I guess we could say the name. So if WildStar, which I have
Yeah,
my
Wildstar,
toes
the
in my
name of it is
toes in
not
my
under NDA.
yeah, whatever,
The
whatever.
game who shall not be
Um,
named.
exactly. I don't know what I'm alled to say because
Well,
I
you
know so
can call
much.
the
No,
game
just kidding.
Wildstar.
But
It is from
you're
Carbine. We
right.
do have a Friday
um,
show, Cosmotronic, plugging. It's all about
um,
Wildstar.
yes, I'm hoping that's huge. If it's not, I was actually looking at EverQuest Next as well.
Mm.
Um, so I'm hoping that games continue to be fun, difficult. I'm waiting for something to be difficult again. I don't
You
mind
and me both.
progressing more than one night in a new content cycle, even if it's just adding gates and forcing us to wait longer. Is better than going in and clearing everything the first week and being like, well, no, that was okay. Um,
That is an incredibly frustrating thing, and I think that's why I'm cautiously hopeful when it comes to Wildstar, because we're bringing back 40-man raid, which in itself brings back a complexity level. I mean, my
yeah,
first
we have another
40-man
tier.
raid, I learned firsthand how frustrating it can be, but I also learned how you didn't need everybody present to take down a boss.
Oh,
You could
so
very
true,
easily have bear
so
humping and only
true.
have 26 people active and still be successful, which I don't agree
Yeah,
with
I
at
mean, I can
all.
definitely think of instances early on in our tenure at D&T where there was 25 people carrying 15 other people. And it
I
was even more evident in EverQuest with 72-man raids. We'd have a bad night and there'd only be like 44 people online,
mm,
only 44 people online, and still be able to kill everything. So I'm hoping that they're actually required. I'm hoping that the
well,
skill set required. I have a feeling that in that game, not to get too off topic here,
oh no, by all
20-man
means,
raids will
we
be more popular just because they're so much easier to manage.
we'll see. I don't know. I mean, one of the things we were talking
I hope
about
I'm
is the
wrong.
generation gap. Which we were discussing how you have your jersey numbers there. There's a generational gap that's occurring, and there's a whole new generation coming in that's never experienced 40-man content, and
Right.
they will probably find it to be incredibly complex, especially under. And this is where I'm going to take off just the typical, game journalist hat and put on my fangirl hat because I am a huge Wildstar fangirl. But I love the concept that they're bringing in with the environment. This is the kind of
Hmm.
game where, from the gameplay footage that they are displaying through their live streams and the fact that they've lifted the NDA on allowing people to or certain people stream from 1 to 15, you see that if you stand still and press number 3 for your cheese cannon, so to speak, although they don't quite have a cheese cannon, but if you just
Hmm.
stand still and do that, you will die.
Yeah.
Which means if you
Yeah.
go
I
in as
mean,
a
you have to
40-man
move.
group and you have one person who decides to avoid the telegraph or stand in the wrong part of the telegraph, I want that to actually have an impact on the raid as a whole.
Yeah.
This is not to say they're going to do it, but I'd love to see a thing where every time somebody died, you buff your boss. Kind of like the dinging boss back in Zul'Gurub. Do you remember
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Uh,
Or like Archimond and Hyjal, where if you were a certain class that died, he got a different ability. It would be like 5k damage, or like everybody's dotted, or whatever. Yeah. No, I know exactly
exactly.
what you mean.
I want there to be repercussions for every mistake that is made. I want that
Well,
challenge back. Gosh, I'm not greedy at all when it comes to rating.
they're
No.
on record. They're on record saying they're going to cater to the 1%. The 1% unfortunately doesn't make these studios money, so they're obviously going to have other stuff. Maybe that's what 20-man ratings for. I'm not sure. But
Don't know.
I'm hopeful.
They haven't released any information
optimistic.
about it. That, yeah,
that's true.
exactly. That's exactly
We know
right.
nothing about like the difficulty levels. We might know their names, but we don't know how difficult it's going to be.
We don't know how they're balancing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, okay.
And it's tough.
Let's come back to tanking, because I have a feeling you and I could just go on forever about WildStar, at least in this case.
When people watch this, everybody's going to have to skip over the last 15 minutes probably if all they're interested in is tanking information.
Fair enough. But yes, okay. So here you are. You are in a tank. You're in a tank. You're playing your tank. We're not playing World of Tanks here. But you are the tank. You are in a raid. What goes through your head?
Through my head. Are we talking about during like a boss encounter or just the entire time?
Well, let's separate it, because in all honesty, there is sort of a difference between what you're doing when you're just, say, doing trash, even if it's for the first time, versus, say, a boss encounter. But you know your cycle. You know what's going to bring up your damage mitigation. You know how your particular abilities are going to function, because as you've said already, you're the kind of person who puts that extra effort in to understand your class. You know your rotation. Great.
Well,
but there obviously has to be some kind of checklist in your head that you're going through, whether you realize it or not. So let's start with trash. Very first pull. Well, go for it.
If you watch, or if anybody here watches any of our Star Wars streams, we stream them, the VODs, we stream them with voice. So you can hear my voice, you can hear everybody else's voice. And you'll hear me at times immediately get irritated, or just harp on the idea of efficiency. I mean, if it's farm, we love challenge. I would like to raid 5-6 nights a week during progression because I want it to be necessary because something's difficult. But when it's farm, I want to be in and out. Chances are I've made plans for Wednesday. I don't want to come in an extra day when it's farm. So I want to be able to make it as quick as possible. So when it comes to trash, my number one thing is just to keep the raid moving. I have a keen eye on the raid frames. A lot of tanks fall guilty into just having small raid frames, for instance, or raid frames they don't pay attention to. Maybe they don't even have them open because they're like, well, I don't have to heal anybody. You know, what do I care about targeting other people necessarily?
That makes me think of people who don't use things like intervention properly.
Yeah,
you know, there are reasons why you would want to lay on hands your healer or something. Exactly.
Again, that's something that separates bad from good from excellent. But I have them sort of front and center, constantly paying attention. So I know, okay, I'm going to slow down for 30 seconds, let people get their mana back, get energy back, whatever it might be. And then I'm going to keep on just churning along these pools in order to get to the bosses as fast as possible. The whole sort of checklist in my head, it's tough at the very beginning of a new instance. You're more reactive with your cooldowns. You're like, crap, I'm dropped to 20%, let me pop this cooldown. And maybe you'll still do it during trash if the healer's AFK, but usually you shouldn't be falling that low during trash. But once you've pulled something during progression a few times, or once you know what's coming on farm, what's running through my head is cooldowns a lot of times. So I'm thinking to myself in the middle of a boss encounter, can I use this cooldown here? Because in my internal clock or in my /timer, if I have that open, I know that in 2 minutes, the boss is going to hit this phase, and I need shield wall for that. So if I'm 90 seconds away from it or what have you, then in my head I'm like, okay, well, I'm probably not going to use that. I'm going to focus more on my survivability. So use, in Star Wars you have certain abilities as a tank that help mitigate damage that you can, as a juggernaut anyway, that you can actually cast. They're not always part of your normal rotation, or they don't have to be if you're trying to output more DPS. So depending on certain times in the fight might determine what abilities I'm using. Maybe I know cooldowns on stuff, even like aggro causing abilities that I might hold off on using because they have a long cooldown. And I know that I'm going to need it immediately because this boss is going to shift into another phase where he or she drops aggro. So stuff like that is constantly going through my head to make sure that as I'm tanking, I'm obviously not dying, and you have to shout out to healers. You shout out to yourself. You gotta, you have to trust them and rely on them. Yeah, raise the roof. So stuff like that is running through my head to ensure that I'm putting the raid group, especially if I'm the only one taking damage or taking the most damage, in the best possible situation. And that's especially true with phase encounters.
Do you find, because this is something, I really wish I had brought this up in the healing show, but we had to move quickly through it because we had Mizpah with us at the time, and Mizpah was talking. That's my way of teasing him. Sorry. But one of the things that I find interesting is, we talked earlier about having a challenge. However, when we have our cooldowns, have you ever found yourself being guilty of hesitantly not using cooldowns? Or have you found yourself overusing them? Are you one of those people who just goes, okay, this has a 2-minute cooldown. I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to. Either everyone's dead because you've wiped, or all of a sudden, like, the boss is dead and you're sitting there going, I didn't need to use that. That was a boring fight. So are you one who overuses them or underuses them?
Overuses them on progression, underuses them on farm. When they can both get me in trouble.
Finding the balance is key then.
Exactly. It's that internal clock. Healers need to look at the raid meters and press a button to heal. They need to be very aware of what's going on. DPS and tanks are the two classes. Obviously, you want to be aware, but are the two classes especially that, you can get into a rhythm with the abilities that you're using. You get into your internal clock. I don't have to look at my cooldowns all the time because I know I counted 5 seconds in my head whether I realize it or not. And then I know to use that ability without even looking on, my action bar if it's off cooldown.
Well, see, that's kind of funny considering the fact that our healing one, we were discussing the healing rhythm. Because there is actually a rhythm to healing. It depends on the type of healer you're playing, but there is a rhythm, and it requires you being very aware of the fight, because you know when the next spike's coming. It requires being very aware of your own internal cooldowns and balancing every spell that you do based on your cooldowns. It is also, being able to work with the latency you've got going for you, knowing the tank is one, knowing the DPS and the damage. If, as I had mentioned in the healing one of the greatest healers I ever healed next to, and I'll just drop the fact that it's my sister, she knew the tank so well that she could tell you within like a split second when their health was going to drop to a certain point because she knew how much mitigation that they were going to take. And she had this full rhythm going and let them drop to 1 health repeatedly just because she could. But then they were right back up to full health. So it was just her way of, going, yeah, it's fine. Mana's fine. Healing's fine. But there is this certain rhythm you can get into if you know the fights, if you know the group. Because then you're like, yes, I know what's coming. I know what's coming. And we were talking about, listening to certain types of music because it has that beat to it. And it's almost, I don't want to say it's a heartbeat because that's such a healer statement. But, dubstep is really, really good. I'm not going to lie. I use dubstep for druid healing. So, but... well,
that's because you can, because you're just throwing around a bunch of hots. So.
It's a steady 140 BPM. So when you're dealing with the hots, when you know where the actual, haste happens to be and where you're at, but boom, boom, yeah. And I'm not about to drop the bass because I'm not really good at beatboxing.
Well, but yeah, I apologize. I believe you.
No worries. So going back to the rhythm of tanking. It's the
just
rhythm
like people
of
are
tanking.
going to watch this. Yes, it's the rhythm of the night.
Oh, great.
People are going to watch this video and be like, I don't like this Steve guy, doesn't know what he's talking about, and disagree with what I say. Just like I was at first disagreeing with what you were saying, and I guess I did heal for like a year. So there are fights that I can definitely see there being a rhythm. I guess I meant it more so as I'm not necessarily looking at raid frames unless I know there's debuffs coming out as much as a healer is. So my sort of rhythm is dictated less by what's happening to the raid and more what I'm doing to the boss. I guess that's more so what I meant by.
Actually, I kind of think based on what you've said, it actually kind of works almost like a yin-yang. The healer is going to be paying a heck of a lot of attention to the raid frames. The most common thing is people say that healers play the UI game more so than they actually see what is actually occurring around them because health bars are all in their face, which is why I'm really looking forward to why to start. But anyway, but you have that. We have the quote-unquote raid frames. And we're paying more attention to that and not as much attention necessarily to what we as individuals are doing because the responsibility of the health of the raid sits on us. You have the responsibility of moving that boss 2 centimeters to the right or that ad group, 5 centimeters to the left, and, making certain that you get out of the lava wave or, what have you. And yet you still conditionally pay attention to the raid frames because you were
Hmm.
saying, you need to know when you're going to have to do a certain ability like intervene
Right.
or what have you. So in a way, there's almost like this yin yang that's going on between the healer tank play style. At least that's my
I would agree with
analysis
that.
of it,
I
based
mean,
on what you're saying and my knowledge.
I definitely see your point. I definitely see your point. Um, I mean, it's called the Holy Trinity after all, so
Yeah, I'm
it should
trying to
really be
figure
the
out
Holy
where the
Duo because yeah, DPS come into that. I'm not quite
who
sure.
needs deeps.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm,
so gonna get smashed for that. Don't worry, Deeps. I love you too. Believe me. But yes.
I'm waiting for the MMO or the fight that favors melee over range for one of the few times in MMO history.
See,
It's just tough.
that's
It's
the
just
thing.
tough.
I played a rogue to start, and it was incredibly frustrating because I spent most of my time, because I was a rogue in Molten Core, I spent most of my time going over here and then coming back to the boss. And then going over
Yeah,
here. And my favorite thing was
and
buying
getting
multiple
behind the boss.
daggers,
Yep.
multiple throwing weapons, so I could throw while I was running.
Oh yeah,
I mean, that's old school for you.
that's
Rogues,
very old school.
that's really, really
Um,
old school.
and you had to get behind the mob, which was also annoying because everybody was daggers back in
Yes.
the day, and
Mm.
you couldn't backstab from the front.
Yeah, and then, they brought about something that made wielding swords pretty darn sexy.
Hmm.
Mm.
And now I don't think it matters so much, but I don't follow the game as closely as I used to as far as
There's some concern
like
about
class abilities.
homogenization. There is some concern about homogenization, but I don't know. And that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother show. So let's go back into this. So in your brain, when you are dealing with things like trash, you're paying attention to the raid frames, and you don't necessarily have the rhythm of the knight slash tank going through your head. You're more focused on just keeping everything moving swiftly towards where you
Yeah,
need to go. But once you get
especially
to,
because
oh, go ahead.
okay.
No.
I was gonna say, especially because on a boss, I'm starting off with everything off cooldown. I'll be getting into my rotation, into that rhythm. On trash, by the time I pull the next pull, I don't really care what I have up. I'm just pulling it, and I'll make do. So that's why it's more. It's just more about, for me, it's just more about keeping the raid moving when I'm dealing with trash, and less about, is my rotation spot on. I just want to hold aggro. It doesn't have to be pretty. Let's just kill it without getting killed and get to the boss. But it's
That's-
definitely a different sort of mindset that you enter once you pull the boss.
We've talked about being aware of the surroundings. We've talked about the interesting yin yang that has occurred
Hmm.
between the heal styles with tanks and the things that you pay attention to. Now, awareness is obviously important. You said you like controlling that big giant mob. I remember many a tank who said all they ever saw on their screen was this boss face. They saw nothing else.
Yeah.
Except nowadays you can actually pan your camera out and actually see a bit more, which is kind of important because situational awareness, no matter
Yeah.
what
It's not
class.
that first person EverQuest where it was literally the torso of the boss, and that's all you could see.
Yeah, exactly. Now, based on that, do you think that tanks actually make really good raid leaders?
I thought that's where you were going to go with it.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
100%, I think so. Um, Hopefully, I'm not too long-winded with this response. I've raid led a lot in WoW as both a tank and a healer, and I've raid led the last 2 years in Star Wars as a tank the entire time. I I am positive, absolutely positive, that there are very exceptional, very capable healers that raid lead at a high level, but there are way more ineffective and bad ones than there are good ones, just by virtue of the fact of what they are doing,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to be aware of so much. And DPS obviously are fine raid leaders, but I think tanks make excellent raid leaders, especially. I mean, if I have to back up into a corner, I'll pan my camera. It's not a big deal. But being on the boss, and based on the animation, based on tanking it so much, you get that internal clock down. Hell, you don't even need like CT raid or bigwigs or whatever anymore.
Wow, that
When
takes
you're
me back.
when you're tanking, because you just know sort of what's going to come up, so you're able to call it out. You're able to really see your surroundings. I mean, when I'm tanking a boss, if I know I'm going to have 10, 15 seconds where I don't have to move them,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I'm looking at the raid and seeing what everybody's doing. So 100%, I do think the tanks make good raid leaders. I think that I think with all raid leaders and not just tanks, you touched on this earlier. You're talking about, well, they have to wait for you to mark mobs or whatever. I mean, just delegate that sort of stuff, right, and keep it moving. I like being the raid leader as the tank because I know me and I know that I'm going to keep the raid moving. And I'm not going to try to handle every little aspect of it, or it's just going to draw on. I definitely lean on a lot of people.
Well, see, in our healing discussion, we the two healers who were present was the hive leader and myself who were talking healing. We don't really think that healers, while they can be incredibly competent raid leaders, because they need to know all of the stuff about fights and they need to see positioning so that, you know, we can yell at DPS number 4 who decided to stand in the cleave. We can say move, you know, or little things like that. However, I would rather have all of the healers completely and utterly focused on healing. I would rather have all of the tanks completely focused on tanking and just let one of the DPS do it. But at the same time, now you said you could pan your camera around. You could, you know, easily pay attention to the things that are going on. I mean, take a look at what's happening with WildStar. It's not so much you get to back up anymore. You've got the entire environment coming at you to play. So, you know.
So everybody's kind of going to be on equal footing when it comes to raid leading in that game.
Yeah.
At least from what we've seen so far.
That's me going back to my fangirl stuff. Whoops.
I mean, we had... You know, I've raid led in D&T and WoW, majority during our reroll to Horde when we went to Mount Gandis back in 2008. Prior to that, though, a Romanian buddy of ours, good old Bloodshot, who's very old school D&T, who still pops in from time to time. I think he might be married now. He was a mage, and he did a lot of the raid leading. So there's definitely, and we had a rogue as well. Russ Blacken did it for a little bit. So there's definitely a perk to having DPS raid lead.
I would almost want to have a mage over a rogue, because the rogue needs to constantly keep moving in and out of all of those silly, like, spinny stuffs and then get behind them. And whereas if you're actually doing, like, ranged, you kind of have a better chance at seeing everything anyway. Like you said, waiting for the bosses where you actually give credence to the melee, not the ranged.
True.
You know.
So I'm not gonna get into like a debate about if DPS or tanks make better raid leaders, but I do think tanks do make good raid leaders.
Fair enough.
Obviously, if all things are even, they're competent and they're not stupid.
Anyone could do it then. Well, if everyone was on the even keel, it could be anybody. It's just, if you were playing that role, do you think they should be, or have a higher precedence towards leaning to being able to do it without, I'd say, impairing their particular skill set or role within the Holy Trinity?
I think it's fine. I think it's fine, at least because I've been doing it for so long that it doesn't really faze me. You know, I don't use necessarily that push to talk key all the time, right? I could just talk while I'm doing my rotation and moving. So it's not like I'm moving my finger in a funny place in order to chime in to say something important.
Right. So you remove push to talk.
That's clutch. That's clutch, yeah. That is clutch. Just make sure it's at like an audible volume, so when you're breathing, you don't chime in.
Right. So it's about the flow.
Yep.
Okay. Now I'm going to put you on the spot. We did this to Hive. We're going to do it to you. And this is our top 5 list. Now, these are the top 5 most important either traits or awarenesses or skills that a tank should work on. Because, in all honesty, if you think your job is done once you've mastered one thing, you're probably going to fall behind the wayside. But what should a tank work on to be the very best tank that they can be? So we're going to go with the top 5. We're going to start with number 5, so you can think about what's going to be the number one. But starting with number 5.
Oh, wow. So you want them in order, too.
Well, there should be some kind of order of importance.
Sure, yeah, but I'm trying to think. I kind of put everything even.
Is this where I kind of go, we'll be right back after this brief break?
Okay.
So welcome back.
How about this?
It's only been like 4 hours, so yeah, go ahead. Your top 5.
Okay, so I guess 5th tell me if you won't accept this as an answer, because I'm not sure if it's so much skill or a trait that the person has, but I guess it's more of a willingness to itemize properly.
Okay.
And what you see a lot of tanks do is, and I touched on this earlier in the interview, I was like, well, I like seeing big numbers on top of my head and then getting healed back up and
Pure
not dying.
stamina. Just stamina.
Exactly.
You need nothing else but stamina. Hell.
Exactly. So a lot of tanks, like if you don't take the time to inspect people properly, we'll just click another tank, be like, he has 43,000 HP, I have 41,000. What am I doing wrong? And then you look at them, it's like, well, they augmented all stamina, and you have like 8% more dodge. What's important? 2,000 health or 8% more dodge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we all know the answer. It's the dodge. So I think itemization, sort of doing your homework and not just trying to be like, I have the most HP, is very critical.
I remember the first time I ran across a bear that had over 1,000 health, and it was right before the, the one right before Mist of Pandaria. The Wrath of the Lich King, I think.
Yes.
Was it Wrath of the Lich? No, it was the Burning Crusade. Yeah, something like right before the Burning Crusade.
Wasn't
or
there
right
something
before
after Burning Crusade before? They didn't go Burning Crusade. Went Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, then something else, Cataclysm,
yeah. But I remember it was right before one of them came out, and they like went and they geared up and just went to like over 100k health, and it's because they bring in the new talent trees and everything. It was just like, oh, but they never rated that way. Let me just state that point blank. They never rated that way. It was just a joke at the time. But yeah, itemization.
I remember when I hit 8k HP, I think in BWL, that was like the this is serious business.
And now they're bringing item squish.
Yeah. So I would say the ability to itemize properly is very critical.
That is actually an answer I will accept.
Nice, awesome. But now when I go down this list, I'm gonna actually write this down because I might have to.
Should we take a small break and come back in?
No. I just want to write them down as I say it in case I decide to change it.
Okay.
Okay, so fourth most important thing for a tank, I would say, is can I be as cliche and say something like awareness, as in
like situational awareness or self-awareness or
situational awareness, like pulling, like taking stuff off DPS, like getting mobs off of healers, being able to pick up ads properly, awareness.
Right.
Is that fair enough? Especially when it comes to stuff being on healers, who oftentimes, when a new ad spawns during an encounter or something's aggro, will go to a healer first because they're instantly generating threat because they're probably have a hot on somebody, for instance.
I can't tell you as a healer, the most frustrating thing in the world is heal tanking. As a squishy.
Oh yeah. Heal tank, I guess for me.
Heal tanking and followed by the quickly, why did you die? Because you didn't pull the darn mob off of me. Here I did. I faded, because at the time I was a priest.
I was just going to say
faded. I put a bubble on myself. I even said, help. And I still died, because I was heal tanking.
I bet you were a night elf, too, and you did the spacebar and flipped away. I bet you were a night elf. I got you pegged.
Okay, I did have a night elf. You're right. However, my favorite is still my Draenei shaman, but that's.
I would think I was. Well, I played shaman when we re-rolled, so I was Tauren shaman. That was before.
Why weren't you a Tauren paladin so you could just be a holy cow? And there's the bad pun.
That's not bad. I never even thought about that before. That's decent. I almost saw a druid.
How could you not think of a holy cow?
I don't know. It just never came to me. I saw a druid named Owly McBeal once, which I thought was kind of funny, but it's not as funny as holy cow.
Aww. Okay.
Tell me if you won't accept this one.
I like that I get to make these judgment calls. It shows that you're not the control freak, ego-driven tank of the mythical ethos and stereotype. But yes. By all means.
Oh, I don't think anybody in D&D
Hold
really
on,
was.
let me get
Especially
my
'cause of progression
scales.
and stuff. It was
I'll
always...
weigh your answer. Go on.
um.
So number 4 is
So,
situational
so
awareness, or just awareness
situational
in
awareness. So, because
general.
I don't know if this ties into awareness, but a lot of tanks are like, "Well, I have aggro on this mob, I'm good," and they don't realize that. Well, you need to hold aggro on these 5 mobs, and not just this one mob, right? So
Right.
they kind of got those blinders on and are just focused on what has aggro on them, and they're not, tab targeting if they have to, if they don't have a lot of AoE abilities, or tab
Mouse over
taunting,
taunt.
or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I think a lot of tanks, especially you see this in dungeons all the time, like when you're leveling up and stuff, tank like with blinders on. It's like, okay, I pulled this mod, this is what I'm tanking, I'm not really worried about what else happens.
Wow.
Are we good?
Yeah, situational awareness is definitely a key one. I'm going to be curious to see what you think is more important than situational awareness.
That's why I'm saying them as they come to mind. Why do you think I'm writing them down here? I think I have one that's more important than situational awareness. So we're on the second one here, right? So we said
We're on
itemization.
the third one.
Well,
Itemization.
We're not going to count itemization, situational awareness, and the ability to tank multiple mobs. 2.5.
If you think the ability to tank multiple mobs is one, we could definitely consider it.
Okay, we'll consider it. We'll stick with awareness. You're putting me on the spot. I really should have put more thought into this question. I should have known it was coming or something. Because for me, a lot of it is just...
I wonder
why. Did Mispo have a difficult time answering this, or was he like bang, 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 bang?
No, the Hive leader kind of already wrote out his answers.
Ooh,
Sort of.
Ooh.
He had certain key things that he wanted to get across, which is kind of why I sent you this in advance. But
so I just like talking. I just fly by the seat of my pants. I am in consulting, so I talk to customers every day.
Do you think that flying by the
don't
seat of your pants is how you should tank?
Yes. You know what? That's not bad.
That's number 1.
That's not bad.
Number
Flying
1, fly by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's pretty good. Okay, so we have itemization, we have awareness. Honestly, this might be more circumstantial. So we talked about ego, and there is an ego involved, but you're not going to be successful, especially as a tank, if you don't ask questions to those other players that are better than you. So I guess that's the same for every class.
So seek learning. Seek knowledge.
So be inquisitive, right? And actually try to... Big word of the day. And
it's probably our $1 million word.
And so instead of using the cookie cutter rotation or approach, talk to folks in guilds that are better than you. I can't tell you how many times, like I said, people have contacted me for a particular game or particular fight, and unless it's like our direct competition, who I know we're still racing against, I'm not gonna withhold that information. I mean, it's pointless.
I like the fact that there's some kind of business rule, they won't roll an alt to come ask me questions. No, they would never do something like that, would they?
Well, when it's a question about build or rotation, they're probably genuinely asking about that. If the level 1 alt took so in phase 4 of this fight, how do you guys handle it? Because we definitely had that
that's
happen.
a little different than actually finding out how to say spec or gear or itemize or understanding a rotation or something like that. I think
during Horsemen.
Go ahead. Especially during
four Horsemen progression, we had our IRC
40 man?
channel and 40 man.
Okay.
Which is probably our most famous one first. We had a lot of people come in IRC channel and be like, I'm in a family guild and trying to figure out how to handle blah blah.
Is that the one where everyone ran into the very boss with Kel'Thuzad and then died except for one gnome who just ran around for 5 minutes?
No. That was.
Were you there for that?
Kel'Thuzad. I was there for that. That was the same instance. That's two bosses later.
That was the first time I ever heard of you guys.
Oh, really?
Because someone said, you have got to see this. I'm like, what? And they showed it to me, and it's just, the Benny Hill music. And I'm just sitting there going, what the hell? Just the silence. We're serious. And then, WTF, guys? Yeah. It was so you were there for that.
I was there for that. I was a gnome warrior back then, because
It's
I
a shame
wanted
it
to
wasn't
be as
you.
small as possible. No, it wasn't me.
Oh,
I wanted to be as
you're the
small
one
as
who wanted to make
possible.
us healers yell at the little bumps that were in the room because we couldn't get line of sight on you.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
I had to tank Fireball by jumping on some ledge, or by eating savory deviate delight. I think
to turn
me
you
into
into
like
a pirate, or
So
you know,
there are definitely certain fights that I had to do that.
a noggin fogger to turn yourself into a skeleton.
Oh yeah,
And
oh,
that
yeah,
was
for sure.
actually part of your survival buff. If you didn't have that buff.
Yeah.
I see what you're doing. You're delaying answering the top 5. I see what you're doing.
Well,
Brilliant
you know what I'm struggling
tanking.
with?
You have
You know what I'm
tanked the question and have properly distracted the healer. Good
Oh,
job.
I guarantee you, people when they watch this are going to be like, "This idiot doesn't know what he's talking about." And what I'm struggling with is separating what makes a good tank from what makes just a good player. Because I feel like there's so much all of it intertwines that I'm trying to pick 5 tank specific things.
So as a consultant,
And
should
that's
you
what
and
I'm
I sit
struggling
down and build a Venn diagram?
We could.
Should
draw
we
this thing?
put ourselves together and build a brilliant Gantt chart to go with it?
I mean, if that's what it takes, I'll bring out an abacus too. I don't know what that's going to be useful for, but it's whatever we need to do.
Oh, man.
By the way, you asked me what was better than awareness. I was going to say number 1 is be able to hold aggro. I mean, come on, that's true, right? That is you have to
Okay.
accept that because that's 100% true.
Now, see, I would think that that would be the side effect of everything else that you're doing on this list. You should be able to hold aggro as a side effect of itemization, as a side effect of knowing your skill sets, knowing your rotation, asking the questions of the people who are quote unquote better than you, testing out these actual rotation and builds and things like that. You know, getting that firsthand experience, not being afraid to pull the boss for the first time, even though you may completely be like losing your lunch over, you know, the fact that this is my first raid pool. Oh my gosh, you know, take the chance, what have you. You've got all these things going on, and by result of that, you are a tank. But I think I see where you're coming from when it comes to trying to say this is what makes a tank different skill set brain-wise than a healer, than a DPS. And yet at the same time, you've got your Venn diagram where everything very neatly meets up and it just makes a exceptional good or bad player even.
Yeah, it all goes hand in hand. So, you know, you need to have the right itemization for survivability, for hit, you know, hit the mob, generate threat, whatever it might be. Need to have that situational awareness. Need to be able to ask questions in order to fully understand your class. And that goes true for every class, but
We like
especially
inquisitive.
tanks.
Inquisitive is really brilliant. We'll use
Being
this word.
inquisitive all feeds into holding aggro, which apparently I'm not allowed to use.
I'll let you use it because otherwise I have a feeling we'll be here for a very, very long time and we'll have to have another cut screen 6 hours later.
I was busy at work today. That's why I told you we were going to have to do this a little bit later than you might have originally wanted to schedule. So
Like I said, I'm a gamer. I sleep at very weird hours. And yes, future me, it is a very weird hour, and you know why you're so tired now.
Well, I'm sorry I'm keeping you up. I hope you don't get up early in the morning.
Are you kidding me? This is great. And that's the thing. It is so rare to have the ability to speak with someone who has, one, the experience that you do, but is also, you've got more than one game under your belt as a tank. A lot of the tanks that I know have specialized in either 1 or 2 games. You seem to have run a little bit more of a gamut. So to me, it's sort of like you said, be inquisitive as a tank. To me, it's a matter of, as a healer, I want to know all the things, which means I'd like to see from your perspective why a tank is important. Actually, that's a good question. Why are tanks important? Should they really be a part of the Holy Trinity? Should the Holy Trinity even exist? Ooh, we're back on topic. Amazing.
Yes, absolutely. I think the Holy Trinity should exist. We used to make fun of the idea of a boss being on a tank when there's people stabbing it in its ass or in its rear, and with healers.
Shouldn't it be
people
going after
alive.
the healer? Because isn't
Exactly.
the healer more dangerous than the tank?
Exactly. We would joke that if like a GM ever decided to control a raid encounter, it would just go straight for the healers.
Great. Now I
You
got
know,
the
it's
Benny Hill
impossible or
music
not.
in my head, watching all the healers go. Ah!
So some people argue that it's stupid. It makes no sense.
Right.
Why would it work that way? So there are fights that I really like that felt like actual, really big encounters. Like even if you look at Cthulhu, if you remember Cthulhu, it was more of a fight than it was a
Mm-hmm.
tank and spank. Now you had to tank tentacles or eyeballs or whatever they were, but so much of it was like a coordinated attack,
Yeah.
which was really really neat, and it didn't follow the Holy Trinity quite to a T. Um,
Well, it gave people more
except for those,
responsibility than just standing
yeah,
behind the boss, than just quote unquote holding the aggro, than
exactly,
just
exactly.
healing. It takes me back to the encounters where if you as a healer didn't do deeps at the same time, we failed.
Mm,
The ones where you were the only person who saw shadows. You know, you're the only
yeah,
person who saw shades, or you had to kill your own shade, or,
yeah.
you
That was
know,
God. What was that? That was Leo Theris the Blind, I think.
yes,
That was him.
the Sherpen Shrine Cavern, SSC.
Yes, yeah, it was
Yes,
SSC.
it was SSC. But the thing
That was
is,
another world first. Maybe it was the U.S. first. I can't remember. This was years ago.
it was a
I'm just,
first, and
I'm
that's
living
all.
off a reputation now.
Don't worry, everything I say as a tank is true because I've got firsts, world and US, behind me.
Oh, I got carried by our DPS of this. Let me tell you.
Oh, see, that's interesting. Okay, so we've got, in your opinion, the fact that the Holy Trinity is important. Although you do
Yes.
believe that in order to keep yourself entertained, it needs to not be a tank and spank. There needs to be challenge to it. There needs to
Oh,
be
for
variety
sure.
to it. And the concept of tank swapping is, I'm assuming, pretty awesome to you.
It's
Or
awesome.
do
Tank
you find
swapping,
yourself bored when you are doing the tank swapping and you're not the one that the boss is currently focusing on because you're waiting for those debuffs to come off?
definitely not bored. I think tank swapping has become, or if it hasn't completely become, needs to become just the norm at this point. So, now you have like vehicles being added to fights. You have
Mm,
people drinking potions and becoming a giant mob who has a new ability bar and needs to do stuff. All that stuff adds variety to the fight and kind of slightly bends the Holy Trinity a little bit
hmm.
because it gives more responsibility to other people.
Right.
Um, that's why I like Terran Gorfine so much. If you remember that, it picked a random person. Everybody in your raid, whoever was picked, needed to know how to shackle those ghosts and kill those ghosts in a timely manner.
Whew.
So I don't think you'll ever get rid of the Holy Trinity, but you need to have creative encounters. It's
Mm.
okay to have that one sort of benchmark encounter halfway through the instance, which is kind of a tank and spank that hits really
The
hard, and
DPS
it's
one, or
the
DPS
DPS
check, or the
check,
heal
the
check,
gear check,
the
whatever
gear
it is. I mean,
checker.
that's
Yeah.
fine as long as everything else is very interesting. And I look at
Hmm.
raids from EverQuest all the way through to when I stopped playing WoW and even Star Wars, and the complexity of raid is to the point now that I'm still having fun if I'm not tanking, because chances are I'm doing something else or I'm responsible for something else.
Right.
Um,
Again, that's why I'm kind of
so I
looking
don't get
forward to Wildstar because it definitely seems
yeah,
like the kind of thing where if you're not quote unquote doing something, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
right.
Except and I'm just going to put my little Wildstar hat on again real quick. Just the concept that, there's not your typical set rotation either. You need to make the decision, is this the time that I use this particular ability
Yep.
in this direction with this 3D thing going? Should I be jumping at the same time, or should I be jumping, turning, taking you back to the old school hunter quest to get your bow? Should you actually be doing these turn jumps? I mean, what is it you need to do? And I'm really looking forward to the challenges that come with that. But
Oh yeah.
that's my
Oh
wild
yeah.
star.
Yeah, months from now. It's fun. There's a lot of dodging in that game and a lot of jumping to avoid sort of
And
certain
and the
stuff.
best part
So,
about it is everybody gets the double jump, so
yep.
everyone can jump, heal, tank, and move away from all of the
It's gonna be a lot.
bosses.
It's gonna be a lot more responsibility for sure.
Oh gosh, I'm really looking
Um,
forward to that. I really am. But yes, I'm totally pulling us off topic because you just keep reminding me of things that just make me think of what's
and because I
coming.
can't think of 5 things to separate being a good tank versus just being
A
excellent
good
tank versus
player.
just being an excellent player.
Yeah, I
That's a cop out. I'm sorry, but it's just so true.
no, I that's the thing. The one thing that we added on for healers that I will let you steal or borrow
Okay.
Give credit because, was my
Legally
idea.
plagiarized.
Yes, legally plagiarize myself under the Creative Commons license, if you don't mind. No. But to me, it was be passionate about it. Really
Yeah.
be excited about that particular role. It makes a difference whether you are a melee DPS, a range DPS, a caster, or if you have to punch somebody in the face to heal them because you're using some kind of nifty jujitsu or something like that. Whatever
I
your role, be passionate about it. Don't just be
I didn't know we can.
lackadaisical.
I didn't know we could use stuff like that. I was actually
That's why I
thinking
said
like
traits.
actual. Okay, okay, it's true. You did say traits. Well, yeah, I agree because you're not topping any sort of meters except for like healing taken meters. You're not typically getting those big numbers. A
We
little
could
bit
get
less
into
so
a
now
huge
in WoW,
debate
thanks-
about utility versus meters versus the
Yeah,
combination and the balance therein,
yeah.
but I'll let you slide.
Um, WoW a little bit more so now. Like tanks do a good amount of damage, or at least for a couple tiers they did. But for the most part, when you're tanking, you're not seeing 100,000 crits on top of the boss's head.
You're seeing it over
You're
your
not
head with the amount of health you've
exactly
lost
exactly. You're not
or
seeing
absorbed,
you know,
depending
like,
upon what you're
fi-
playing.
Yeah, you're not seeing 50k crit heals on somebody that takes their health bar from 20% to 90%. So
God, those are beautiful.
it's more like being an offensive lineman in football. To
Ooh,
me,
sports
less
analogies.
glamorous. It's less glamorous. Yeah, you're the one tanking, you're the one getting healed, but
Either the
what you're
quarterback or,
doing,
yeah.
what you're doing to me anyway, I've always said this, and I might take some flack for it. I think that tanking, especially when you're good at it, is the easiest thing to do in a raid. I think it is harder, or I think it's harder to heal and to heal effectively, and I think it's harder to be very good DPS and survive.
I would honestly throw out to you that that is the case for all. If you understand your class in specifics, what you're playing, whether it's a tank, healer, or a DPS, if you understand your rotation, if you understand your cooldowns, if you understand your rhythm, because, you really should have an awareness of your rhythm. If you have that and you've got the passion, all of a sudden it's no longer the job, it's the zone. At least that's a phrase that we had used on the healing show. You disappear into a zone where everything, that check rotation you've got going, becomes more subconscious than conscious. It just becomes this natural part of everything that you're doing. And at that point in time, it is easy because you're not freaking out, you're not panicking, your heart rate has gone down because you're in almost this state of zen. This is, the job I'm doing. I know that if I press the number 3 key, my cheese cannon's going to go off and everything's going to be fine. And I know at this point we're going to have this huge thing come down. So with the fear coming through down the tremor totem, I'm speaking heals, obviously, because I'm a healer, but it's the same thing for you. You understanding that your shield wall needs to go up at a certain time, or you need to do the AoE taunt, or you need to throw your saber, or whatever it is you need to do. When you understand all those things inherently, everything's going to be easy. And that's when you start paying much more attention and you start, in my opinion, craving the complex fights. Because at that point, it's no longer mastering the character. Now you want to master the fights. And if you have a tank and spank and you already have all of that mastered, you're going to be so bored.
Well, I clearly never got to that Zen. There's a lot of sort of Buddhist analogies we were making.
I was just realizing, yin yang, Zen.
I never got to that Zen on my healer, so maybe that's why.
Do you get
I couldn't
onto
quite
it on your
equate to
tank?
that. Oh, absolutely.
Well, see, that's the thing.
Absolutely.
That's your passion. That's your passionate role. You will take the tank role over a heal role any day, whereas I would take heal over tank any day of the week. Most people who have ever had me tank understand that's probably not a good idea because I actually get really pissed off if the healer hasn't done their job, and then I'm like, screw this, put my tank down, go pick up my healer because obviously I can do it better. And there's the healer ego right there. Don't let my friends lose their health because I get angry and I will bring my healer out and show you how to do it. But, and then I'll go back to tanking. But yes, you're right. We have a lot of Zen things. So let's sum everything up. I'm going to let it be really easy. We've gone over a lot of actual traits that, someone can have. And yes, I will have to, 7 hours later. I'm going to end on one question and one fun question for you.
Okay.
In your entire history of tanking and being a tank, What is the greatest experience you have ever had? Your number one experience as a tank.
As a tank.
As a tank.
Okay.
Specifically as a tank. Yes.
Specifically as a tank. Got it.
Specifically as a tank. Yes, yes, yes.
Um,
And now we get 13
no,
hours
no,
later.
I got it. You know what? I got it. Because I mean, I feel like I'm taking your questions very literally, and this is the right way to take this one. So specifically as a tank,
Yeah.
might not necessarily be my proudest moment in MMO gaming, because I think like our 4 Horsemen kill was probably the proudest I've been in a video game, but not the proudest I've been as a tank, because you needed 8 tanks. We had 8 tanks for that fight, and that was a group effort through and through, because we had 3-4 tanks who don't normally tank.
Most people I know who actually had a chance to do 40-man, 4-man, or the 4 Horsemen, say that is probably still one of their favorite fights.
Yeah, but I think my favorite as a tank would have to be,
or your greatest experience. Doesn't always have to be the favorite, but your greatest experience.
Greatest experience, but it's also my favorite, just as as my tank, solely because I was on my tank. So I told you I was a gnome, and I picked gnome specifically because I wanted to be like this tiny thing going up against like this giant monster, and I thought it would just look really cool if I was the size of its foot, and I'm like taking blows from it. So it was, I think it was called Brood Lord Lash Slayer. It was the third boss of BWL after Veilstraz. And that fight, when we got to it, and keep in mind, this is before boss killers where you submitted screenshots, well before WoW Jitsu and WoW Progress, where an API just pulled what you had. So people were posting on the Raid and Dungeon forums, and I think we got like 3rd or 4th in the world at the time, or at least the people that posted. So we were really excited, really proud of it. And there's no video, but if you were there, you would know why. We progressed on that fight for a couple days. That boss had like this Mortal Strike ability, but he would do it really fast, and he was just one-shotting our tanks. So finally we were like, okay. And by the way, so this is what really got me into tanking in WoW. Because at that point I wasn't sure if I was tanking, but I was off tanking because I wanted to be a DPS warrior. We threw, I think, 9 tanks at that thing. Just tanked them up against the gate. Just threw 9 tanks at it, and we would cycle aggro and cycle our cooldowns and just pray that we wouldn't die. But we knew we were going to die one by one, and just hopefully the boss would be dead before the last tank was dead. We ended up getting that kill with 3 people alive. I was the only tank alive. I was at 14 HP when that boss died. The last 2 people alive were both healers. So they were, I don't even know if they were casting spells. They might have been out of mana. They were like wanding, right? You would just like right-click the wand and it'd be like throwing a baton at the boss. So that was really proud. The vent eruption for that honestly might have been more than even our 4 Horsemen kill. Because it was our first experience of really going down to the wire on something, and just persevering.
And surviving with 14 health.
And surviving with 14 health. And especially because clearing to that boss, I don't know if you did BWL, was the most annoying thing on this planet, because there were little slow traps. The slow traps
and the
that came
rogues had to take care of them, and if they didn't, everyone was just...
And mobs kept spawning.
Oh, so
the entire
that
whelps. 10-minute clear was like, the whelps. It was like running in a dream, and if you wiped, you had to do it again. There was no, I mean, I don't even think you could really effectively, get the raid up, even with like a soul stone.
No.
So,
no.
That too many people would be at the boss. Yeah.
Exactly. Just, oh God. Just thinking back on that, it's just, and my brain's just like, oh, I hate that so much.
Yeah, but that was my favorite or greatest experience.
And that is what really inspired you to go tanking. Boom, that's my thing.
In WoW, yes. And then because of that, I stuck with it for, we're talking about, this was 05. So I stuck with it for another
That's interesting to me, because when we were speaking with the Hive, the most memorable, most greatest experience that he had as a healer was what convinced him to heal.
Oh, yeah?
So I'll be curious to see. I was a little different. I mean, for me, the greatest experience for me as a healer was training tanks, getting them to the point where they didn't need me anymore, because then that meant they were raid ready. and they had the right gear, the rotations down and everything, and I got to just DPS. So, the healer who DPSs, I have done that. I've also made the mistake in heals when I first started healing of telling people, stop DPSing while you're healing and just heal. That's not the way it works, but
we had
that
the
was
10
one
priests.
of the things.
I'm sure you always threw up your Shadow Word Pain and then the Shadow Word Death here and there, if you even had that. That might have been Shadow only, but we always had our healers at least throw up dots. I remember at the end of a fight, you hear it in old school videos all the time.
Yeah.
Everybody throw up dots, healers throw up dots, and you see like 16 Shadow Word Pains across the bar of the boss.
Yeah. Which it just always makes me think back to Oni. More dots. She could be really evil. She really could. There were days where it was just like, yeah, whatever. And then there were days like, why can't we drop her? Why?
Oh, yeah.
Why is she stubborn?
Like an unlucky whelp spawn. There might have been a knockback. There was something. If you got too close to the eggs, they popped.
Oh yeah, it was the bad spawn location for the eggs because I think they spawn in different locations, and all it took is just the people who had to stand behind.
Ani's the reason we figured out that Nefarian strat of using Blessing of Wisdom. And we didn't figure it out till we got to Nefarian, because we would have Ani randomly when we killed her on farm, because I think we were still doing Ani when we were doing VWL, because it had tier 2 helms.
Right.
VWL was still tier 2. She would just randomly turn at the same paladin, right? Because he was the one who always did Wisdom. And we never knew why. We were like, why are you DPSing? Or we'd be like, what are you doing? And he'd be like, I don't know. And then finally, this is like legit like months later, at least a month later, without even thinking about it, somebody, it wasn't me, I can't remember who it was, but God bless whoever it was like, wait a minute. Could it be because of Blessing of Wisdom? And then life was just way easier after that. But Ani was definitely not without her bugs, too. Like that when she did her sweeping flame thing or whatever, that wasn't always...
Flame breath.
Yeah, flame breath. You'd be on the other side of the room sometimes.
Yep,
like,
and you would still get that.
What happened here.
Yep, and then, of course, you've got the extra spawns, and... Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for now in like an MMO. I want to create memories that seem at least as fun as
the ones
WoW and EQ memories were.
That to me is the thing as well. I mean, if I wanted to play a solo game, there's plenty of solo games out there. If I wanted to play a multiplayer game, there's tons of multiplayer games out there. If I wanted a PvP game, there's tons of PvP games out there.
Guild Wars 2?
But if I want to experience that moment where your stomach falls straight through your body and then everything goes silent on TeamSpeak. Raid leader drops talking, the raid assist stops, and then you just hear that roar of excitement because you've downed a boss for the first time. It's a feeling of euphoria, and it's addictive.
Nerdgasm.
It is. It's a straight nerdgasm. And honestly, I miss it. I'm going through withdrawal. I want to bring it back. I want to have that experience again. So I'm with you. I want to have those memories. But the thing is, I've done the 10-man. I've done the 15-man. I've done the 20. I've done the 25. I miss the 40-man. But like you, I've matured. I don't want the 40-man where you only need 26 present. I want the 40-man where if you come in with 39, you can count your blessings if you can do it successfully.
That'd be tough. I'm not sure if we'll ever see that again.
Trying to find that kind of game balance is difficult.
Yeah.
But, we'll see. There's a lot of games that are out there. I mean, Repopulation has started to tweak some people's brains on, some of the stuff that they're talking about. There are a lot of games out there, and there are a lot of new games coming. But when it comes to MMOs, it is so hard to find the right balance and mix. I'm just glad 40-man's coming back. It almost feels like... I just hope it's not rose-tinted glasses.
I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic because I was so excited for Star Wars, and it let me down so hard. I still play it because it's definitely a much better game now than it was then. I said this earlier in the
Do you do the free-to-play or do you play the subscription?
No, we play subscription. I think because there's rankings for
you
Star Wars.
You can't wear gear unless you are subscribing.
You can't hide your helm slot. Yeah, we're consistently when you look at the dates of our kills and our achievements, consistently U.S. first and like world second or third in Star Wars.
Yeah,
But
you are.
and that game has, I think, like 700,000 subs and almost 2 million people total with free to play. But it's not as hardcore as even WoW is now. People call WoW pretty casual now, or whatever Quest was, or what WoWstar promises to be. You know, we haven't had those orgasms in 2 years of rating on Star Wars, because when new content comes out, we're usually done with it within the first week, and nothing is
Buggy!
overly difficult.
Why is he
Or it's
enraging
buggy.
and we're still surviving? Why?
Yeah, sometimes the most difficult aspect of encounters are the bugs right now.
Right.
I love the people in that game, and I do enjoy the game, but I'm waiting for a more epic experience. So that's why I'm cautiously optimistic about WildStar. I just want to temper my expectations.
Well, you and I can have internet knuckle bumps because, in all honesty, I am right there with you when it comes to WildStar. But instead of taking this into what would be our Friday Cosmotronic show,
Sorry.
By the way, if you want to join us for that at any point in time, please let us know. Come talk WildStar with us. So let me ask you this before I basically literally just say to my future self, you can actually come back now and finish the show. Would you actually be interested in coming in and having a discussion of things like what it's like to be hardcore, say, versus casual versus pond life, which is a term that was coined by Gazimoff on one of our shows.
In general or in WildStar?
Oh, no, in general, like really going into topics and stuff. Well, then basically you've just signed yourself on for me occasionally going, Enkay, we've got a really fun topic. Does this interest you? Let me pick your brains.
Yeah, for sure. I'd be happy to.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Do you have any parting words, any names you want to drop, any big ups you want to give? I feel like a radio DJ, which is funny because I don't have Mizpa with me, who normally has the quote-unquote radio DJ voice, even though that's his voice to begin with. But, yes. Do you want to give any shout-outs?
Yeah, let me give shout-outs to a few of my boys. Let me give a shout-out to Rob, a.k.a. Kaboom, for all the hard work that he's done on the DNT website and just being an administrator there, being a steward of exceptional talent. Let me give a shout-out to Blackened and Bloodshot. Don't know where you guys are. Miss you, love you. And let me give a shout-out to Patchwork and all my Star Wars bros. Rom, Dom, Deeps, Besley, Tenebrous, Cac, Furion, Hampy. I'm missing somebody. Devasta. Myself. I'm not shouting out myself, but there's myself. And Tahiri. And I think that's everybody.
You now know that Tahiri is going to turn around and go, "Why am I last?" You know that, right?
I was going through like the raid list in my head. So I was like,
I'm surprised you didn't put yourself first because you're usually in the upper left.
If I missed anybody, it's only because I didn't write down and I forgot who I've said. So, love everybody. Shout out to DNT, and shout out to MMOBuff.TV.
Right, so you got your shout-outs, and this is where I say thank you very much for joining. And also to the future self, you definitely deserve that drink now.
I appreciate it. If anybody has any questions or wants to make fun of me about this or tell me I'm a terrible tank, you can go to dtguilds.com and just message me on there. The name is Enkay, Enkay.
You can also go to the Twitter that's right there underneath.
Yep.
His name.
Right there.
Yeah. Dead on.
Just boom. I can't even see it. They're not gonna believe that. And just tweet us any questions that you might have. But this has definitely been a pleasure. It was a lot of fun. And let me apologize in advance for being terrible and giving you 5 things to make a good tank and instead saying 8 or 9 things to make a good player.
Don't apologize for that, because I think in the end, if you really want to enjoy playing a game, you got to find what you specialize in. And if that's tanking, go for it. If that's DPS, go for it. If that's hardcore raiding, go for it. If it's PvP, go for it. But in the end, you've got to give credit to the fact that if you're playing an MMO, the way you play impacts other people.
For sure.
And I think some people forget that. Which is kind of weird that we have 67 to 70% of players in an MMO actually prefer the solo game.
I don't get that. That's just boring to me.
It doesn't
Especially
make
because I like
sense
tanking. I don't want to tank stuff to death. So it takes a long time.
Well, how do you think I feel? I will heal it to death. that only
Yeah.
worked in one fight on one
Don't tell me. I
dragon.
know the fight. Yes.
One
Damn it. I was gonna
dragon.
say it. Green dragon. I can't remember its freaking name.
Yasara? Something like that.
No, that was the name of the server. Whatever. I don't even know.
But yes,
Maybe that was it.
that was the only time that I really felt as a healer that I was having a true impact on what was going on. But anyway, yes. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
yeah, believe me, I'm going to be picking your brains a lot because we can get sidetracked very easily, but we get sidetracked into stuff that we actually talk about on our shows. So, but yes, back to my future self.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It kind of helps if I actually like unmute myself. Hi everyone, it's Pseudo again. Yeah, I have bended space and time, and I need to give a serious thank you to Enkay for sitting with me and discussing tanking and literally like everything else. As you know, in our shows on Monday nights, we discuss anything that has to do with online gaming, game design, things that impact actual gameplay, game mechanics, etc. And it's really nice to just I guess you could say discuss all those various things that we so much enjoy and love and what makes gaming so important to us. But yes, thank you so very much to Death and Taxes for lending us NK for that particular night to speak with him. Now, apparently, we get to kind of do breaking news, but not quite at the same time. As I mentioned in the news at the very start of the show, the game, the Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, was going to be hitting Kickstarter, and apparently during our show it went live on Kickstarter, which is impressive. And obviously I'm going to be completely obsessed with figuring out what is going to make this game so different from everything else. Everyone who has participated in the chat tonight, I have to take my hat off to you. This just goes to show you the type of audience that we have and why I, as the community manager of MMOBuff.TV, love you guys. Having intellectual conversations and going into depth is something that we love to do. And I like seeing the side comments that were made, and I like seeing the way you guys viewed all the questions and answers, and even some of the things that we were discussing on our own, like having trash. Is that important in a raid? Should there be a lot of trash or a little bit of trash or a small balance? Should that trash even have an impact as to, say, training you on the future bosses coming up? Now, as a reminder to everybody, this will be put onto YouTube. And to those who are watching on YouTube, you're obviously watching it on YouTube. And that link will be up in the morning, or might go out at like midnight my time. Depends on how fast I can get everything up there. When we have everything coming up with MMO Buff this particular week, we have tomorrow night Campfire with Blank Space and with Screenager. Blank Space and Screenager are joining me for the Campfire, where we discuss all things guild and community oriented. Wednesday's Top Draw is not going to be happening this week. It's been a little hectic here in our studios because we are literally getting a studio. So, you know, that kind of impacts how much time we have towards everything. But we will have our Friday Cosmotronic back. And we also have something special happening. Just pay attention to the website, MMOBuff.TV. Make certain that you go there, and you can get to all our social media there, from the Reddit down to our chat room to all of our different pages, Facebook, Twitter, etc. But again, seriously, as I bang into my microphone here, thank you so much for joining. And our next discussion on MMO Buff is the Holy Trinity DPS. It'll be interesting to see what that perspective is going to be, because it seems like there's a lot of similarities, and yet the real difference is just simply, do you want to see the big numbers on you or on something else? Seems to be one of the things that's separating it right now, but we'll find out. And seriously, thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for being a part of tonight's show. And I will see you tomorrow night on The Campfire, where we are going to be discussing whether people should be Team Barry or Team Casey. And if you're not quite certain which team you're on, I recommend checking out our YouTube channel /YouTube/MMO Buff, and actually checking up and seeing and voting, because it'd be interesting to see what side and what team you're on. And on that note, I wish you all a fantastic Monday, and I will see you tomorrow. Good night.